COVID-19 is not just a dangerous respiratory disease, it also messes with our heads. Just when we start to applaud the fact we're bringing it under control, it breaks free and causes chaos. This week, it's been Perth and Melbourne's turn to face the consequences. But tonight, a sight to make all Australians smile with relief. For the first time, we're taking you inside the Melbourne facility where 50 million doses of COVID-19 vaccine are starting to be produced. Just getting to this point has been an enormous and impressive undertaking, and proof of the brilliance of scientists, including many Australians all over the world. If it was going to happen anywhere, the magnificent grounds of Oxford University is the perfect location. A scientific feat, the speed of which no one thought possible.
Right at the start, people were saying, it would be 18 months or so before we have a vaccine, which would have put us into, June 2021 without vaccines. And now it's being used, and that's just wonderful.
The COVID-19 vaccine, developed and approved in under a year. And more than 100 million people already given the jab worldwide.
We're living through history, and a successful rollout of vaccination would be an extraordinary achievement, one of humanity's great achievements, if this can now be counted and we can get back to normal life again.
The apparent success of the AstraZeneca vaccine developed here has taken enormous effort, but it comes as no surprise for Aussie professor Matthew Snape. He's spent 20 years at Oxford helping to find cures for some of the world's deadliest diseases.
So far, I've been working on bird flu vaccines in 2005, swine flu vaccines in 2010, Ebola vaccines 2015, and now coronavirus vaccines in 2020. So I don't know what you've got in your diary for 2025, but I'm not booking anything.
But there is still plenty of work to do. And everyone is wishing Professor Snape and his team success. That's because Australia has so much riding on it. It's the vaccine most of us will receive.
It's been an extraordinary year, and there's not been a lot of time away from work, but I think that is countered by the excitement of being involved in such an important story. It almost will define this age, the period we're living through. And to be a part of trying to solve this terrible challenge that we have at the moment, it's profoundly satisfying.
And it's really because of your incredible work that the rest of us have hope.
The work of many thousands of people across many different organisations, because this is a great international effort.
To come up with a vaccine so quickly is truly remarkable. And quite rightly has many of us dreaming of life as we knew it before the pandemic. But we also need a dose of caution. There are many questions about how it will work and when exactly, if ever, life will return to normal. Here in Australia, our immediate hope lies behind these walls. 17,000 kilometres from Oxford, inside this factory in the outer suburbs of Melbourne, is our ticket to freedom. It's where 50 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine will be made, and for the first time, we've been allowed inside to show it to you.
Well, you really are in the heart of the manufacturing facility now. This is, behind these glass walls is where we're actually growing cells. We're introducing the virus, the live adenovirus, into the spike protein that we're interested in to generate that immune response against the COVID.
So there is coronavirus in that lab as we speak?
Yes, we're infecting a bioreactor with the virus. We certainly won't be going on that side of the glass wall. It would take months for you, for example, to be qualified to be able to operate in that.
Stephen Marlowe runs the vaccine division here at CSL, the only place in Australia making COVID vaccines. It's a complex process with no room for error. So Steve, what's the first step when you're making this vaccine?
Well, I've got something to show you. So it starts with a vial of cells about this size. So it's about 1 mil of cells. Don't worry, there's none in this. It's too valuable. And we expand that up to 2,000 litres of cells.
Wow.
And that's the point that we then introduce the virus into those cells, and then the vaccine production commences. But just to put into context, that is worth millions of doses of vaccine. A tray this size will vaccinate the entire population of Australia. That's the starting point.
How does it feel personally to be making this contribution?
It's probably the most important thing I'll do in my life, actually, when I think about it. I mean, it's that important. I feel like I'm tingling now. It is probably the most important thing I'll ever do.
You're very emotional about it.
Anyway, it has having an effect on me now, actually. I'm just incredibly proud that we can play such an important part, really, in the response.
When can we expect the TGA to approve the AstraZeneca vaccine, given we are so reliant on that one?
What we don't want to do is hurry them, and I suspect it'll be a couple of weeks probably before we can get an approval.
Professor Brendan Murphy was thrust into the spotlight when COVID-19 hit Australia early last year.
These measures.
The former Chief Medical Officer is now the Secretary of the Federal Health Department.
So the vaccine rolling out.
And from his Canberra office, he's coordinating the decisions on which vaccines we'll all receive and when.
So we're getting 2 vaccines in our early rollout. One, the Pfizer vaccine, which is hopefully coming out in late February, and the other one, the AstraZeneca vaccine, which will hopefully come out in early March, and most of the AstraZeneca vaccine will be made in Australia. And they are 2 really good vaccines, in my view.
If most of us are going to receive the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, is that enough to achieve herd immunity?
We don't know. We don't know whether the Pfizer vaccine will achieve herd immunity. We don't know whether any of the vaccines will give us a duration of protection that will lead to full herd immunity. We hope so. That's our ultimate goal.
Does it concern you, though, that there are still so many unknowns?
No, it doesn't, because these vaccines are very new. All we know is that they are very effective at preventing clinical COVID disease, so it's likely that they will create herd immunity in those things, but we don't want to make predictions when we haven't got the data. We don't know if and when a vaccine will come with this virus.
In March last year, Professor Murphy told us all that a vaccine was the best escape from this mess.
That's a beautiful way out, so we have to look at...
Now the vaccine rollout is about to begin, and there's still no promise of a life without masks and border closures. A big reason for that is because scientists don't know if a vaccinated person can still spread the virus or how long immunity lasts. And how much of Australia needs to be vaccinated before we can even look at lifting any restrictions, be it mask wearing, for example?
We obviously want to aim for over 90%. We have that sort of vaccination rate in our childhood immunisation programs up to close to 95%.
That's ambitious, though, for a new vaccine.
It is ambitious, but the more we get, the more I think we will start seeing some relaxations.
And even if every single Australian is vaccinated, does international travel really depend on what the rest of the world is doing? Would we still need to do the 2 weeks quarantine?
Not necessarily. Not if we don't believe that you'll bring the virus back, and if the rest of our population is also protected. So it may well be that the quarantine relaxations will progressively be made as we get the population vaccinated.
Well, that's something to be hopeful about.
It is hope. There's a lot of hope. These vaccines are far better than any of us hoped, and coming far earlier than any of us hoped. And I think we have light at the end of the tunnel now. We just have to not be too impatient.
For the scientists behind the AstraZeneca vaccine, the pathway out of a lockdown Australia is simple.
I do feel that Australia needs to now embrace immunisation, because that is the only way out of this, and the only way for Australia to open up its borders, and the only way for people such as myself to be able to go home and see our families again.
It's the one question that stumps the clever scientists. How long will it be until we can travel again?
I would love to hop on a plane and visit my friends in Australia, but I don't think that's the time to do it right now.
How long before you can do that, do you think?
It's going to depend on how well we contain the spread of virus. If we do a really good job and the level of virus goes way down, then I would feel comfortable in getting on a plane. But I don't think that we can do that right now. As you well know, the situation in my own country is much more serious than the situation in Australia. So Australia might be a safer place to go.
Last year was a year we'd all rather forget.
Life is not going to be the way it used to be.
But it did introduce us to a scientific star. Dr. Anthony Fauci is the authoritative, plain-speaking immunologist
The answer is no.
the United States and the world have come to rely on as an expert guide through this seemingly never-ending pandemic.
Requesting emergency use.
2 victims dying every minute.
As the US recorded more COVID deaths than any other country around the world, Dr. Fauci emerged as the calm, reassuring face of not only a health catastrophe, but a political storm too.
If ever you don't want to have a pandemic at a certain time, you don't want to have it in an election year. And unfortunately for us, we had a pandemic right smack in the middle of an election year, which just heightened the degree of politicization.
The high infection rates, the high death rates in the United States. Is America an example of how not to manage a pandemic?
Well, you know, I wouldn't put it so bluntly. But certainly we could have done better. I think anyone that looks at the numbers will tell you that for a country with the wealth that we have, with the capabilities that we have, to have this degree of infection, hospitalization, and death is really unacceptable.
Mistakes were made, but the US is leading the way in vaccinating its population. Nearly 1 million people are getting the needle every day. 78-year-old President Joe Biden even invited the cameras to film his jab. Dr. Fauci says scepticism about getting the vaccine will be one of the world's greatest hurdles. What do you say to those many people, including those in Australia, who do have a hesitancy towards the vaccine, who feel as though it's been rushed and it's not nearly safe enough?
So the first one that is the most often cited is, well, it's great that you took only 11 months to get the vaccine into people's arms, but that means you rushed it. You must have cut corners. So you explain to people that speed, that doing things in months as opposed to years, was directly related to the exquisite advances in the science of vaccine platform technology. And it was not a rushing. It was not compromising safety. It was purely a manifestation of the advances in science. So when people have skepticism about whether it's safe and effective, we can tell them quite honestly that the process to determine the safety and efficacy was both independent and transparent. And I believe if you can put those facts in front of people, you can win over many of the people who have skepticism.
As Australia gears up for the largest ever immunisation campaign, there's growing concern about new mutant strains of the virus and whether the current vaccines will still protect us.
It appears from the experience in the UK and in South Africa that the mutants appear to be more easily transmissible than what we call the wild type or original virus. The concern is always that we want to make sure that the vaccines still induce a response that's able to contain the virus. It has diminished its efficacy somewhat, but it hasn't eliminated it. So vaccines can still have a positive impact, but not nearly as much as prior to the mutation.
This year, we all hoped to shake off the misery of 2020. And while the new year brings some hope, the lingering questions about the vaccine means we have to face a harsh reality. This nightmare isn't ending anytime soon. Travelling freely around the world may still be another year away, and that's if everything goes to plan.
If we can get the overwhelming proportion of the population vaccinated by the summer, I believe by the time we get to the fall of 2021, we might approach a degree of normality that would also spill over into relaxing some of the travel restrictions. So I would hope that our Australian colleagues can visit us again as we get into the fall. But again, I have to emphasize that's going to be contingent on a lot of things happening, including getting the overwhelming proportion of the population vaccinated.
So when can we book you a dinner here in Australia? End of 21 or start of 22?
Well, how about really give me some cushion? How about the beginning of 2022?
Okay, we'll take that.
He may no longer be president, but Donald Trump can't stop making headlines. This week he goes on trial in the US Senate, charged with inciting his supporters' rampage on the Capitol building earlier this year. While the world was shocked by the shameful attack on democracy, Trump's former attorney Michael Cohen wasn't surprised at all. In fact, 2 years ago, he predicted it. Cohen used to be the Don's closest ally, but ended up an enemy. And in prison, when he took the fall for covering up Trump's affair with porn star Stormy Daniels. But now, from house arrest, he's happy to spill all of his old boss's dirty secrets.
I've lost count as to how many times the disgusting, liberal, mainstream media have attempted to label Mr. Donald Trump a racist, a xenophobe, and a bigot.
Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's one-time personal attorney, devotee, and fix-it man like no other.
Anti-Hispanic, anti-Semite demagogue, and countless others. It's disgraceful.
For more than a decade, he says he was Trump's attack dog with a law degree.
I'm obviously very loyal and very dedicated to Mr. Trump. I think he's going to be not just a good president, I think he's going to be a great president.
But in an extraordinary about-face in 2019, he turned the attack on his old boss.
I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist, he is a con man, and he is a cheat.
Testifying to a congressional committee hearing, he was coming clean on Donald Trump's dirtiest secrets.
But I am no longer your fixer, Mr. Trump.
After being convicted for paying off a porn star for his former boss.
He's a weak person and not a very smart person.
Michael, what's your message to the president? Michael, your message to the president.
Michael, you've described Donald Trump as intoxicating, hypnotic, a visionary, that he had to be president. Do you second-guess your judge of character these days?
Yes, very much so. Donald Trump behaves like a mob boss. He doesn't behave like a human being. He behaves like a mob boss. He talks in code. I understood that code very, very well based upon my close proximity to him. And he knows exactly what he's doing. He knows how he's saying it. He doesn't give the exact order. No different than a mob boss putting a hit on somebody. You know, you could do it with a look. You could do it with the pointing of a finger. There are many ways to do it. And Donald Trump has become a master of that, an absolute maestro in mob talk.
But come January 6, it's a different mob he's accused of directing.
USA! USA! USA!
In one of the darkest and perhaps most shocking moments of American history, Capitol Hill comes under attack.
Where the f*** are they? We're gonna walk down and I'll be there with you.
An ugly mob spurred on, say many, by the man they're chanting for.
Fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not gonna have a country anymore.
Jesus Christ! We invoke your name!
But the fight now is a legal one. Not just for the rabble who turned their wrath on democracy's greatest symbols.
Don't dare call them protesters. They were a riotous mob.
But for the dumped president, charged with inciting them to insurrection.
Given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power.
You predicted that the transition of power would not be peaceful. Even before we saw the mobs, that Donald Trump would not go peacefully. How could you have been so certain?
Because I know Donald Trump like I know the back of my hand.
Article 1. Incitement of insurrection.
This week, Donald Trump goes on trial in the Senate, the only US president in history to be impeached twice.
We know that the President of the United States incited this insurrection.
His conviction for insurrection relies on 17 Republicans to vote with the Democrats.
The mob was fed lies. They were provoked by the president.
Which, despite the initial universal outrage at Trump, now seems insurmountable, with fears of retribution from the man himself. Do you expect that Donald Trump will be judged to have incited that mob? Do you think that that's how the vote will go?
I think that there will be a very difficult time in getting 17 Republicans to do what they know is right, but simply because they fear for their own jobs, that they may not, and they probably will not do it.
Of course, there is an argument that because your country is so divided, this impeachment vote should not go ahead, that the focus should be on the future. The focus should be on the new administration.
Well, that basically would then allow somebody to escape their responsibility, their criminal responsibility, simply because, why? Because he was the former president? Donald Trump was the dog whistle blower for an insurrection, assault, a coup on our democracy, on our capital. How can they possibly try to rationalize the fact that he should not be held responsible for his crimes?
For years, Mr. Cohen considered himself and openly referred to himself as Mr. Trump's fixer.
Michael Cohen says he's a reluctant fall guy for his former boss in the now infamous Stormy Daniels payoff.
My attorney and I are committed to making sure that everyone finds out the truth.
Cohen says on behalf of Trump and out of his own pocket, he paid hush money to the porn star to keep the alleged tryst with Donald Trump secret.
He has never thought women like me matter.
It's all fake news. It didn't happen.
The $130,000 payoff happened during Trump's 2016 run for president, making it illegal.
Did you know about the $130,000 payment from Daniels?
As bank details show, Trump paid Cohen back in installments.
Why did Michael Cohen make it if there was no allegation?
You have to ask Michael's attorney, and you'll have to ask Michael.
But denying any wrongdoing and protected by presidential immunity, prosecutors targeted Michael Cohen.
Southern District of New York has convicted Michael Cohen.
After Michael Cohen received his 3-year prison sentence,
he was sentenced to 3 years jail for the illegal payment as well as fraud.
It's a disgraceful situation. This is a pure and simple witch hunt.
How I ended up in prison for another man's dirty deeds is something that I have a very hard time understanding, but it's okay. One day at a time, I'll get past it.
And do you have no doubt, though, that Donald Trump explicitly knew what those payments were for?
Absolutely. I mean, anybody that would think anything different. I've never met Stormy Daniels. I've never spoken to her. I've never texted her. I've never emailed her. I've never communicated with her. Anything that I did ran through her lawyer. So the notion that I was doing this, without Mr. Trump's expressed knowledge and at his direction, and most importantly for his benefit, it's ludicrous.
Michael Cohen is serving the final year of his jail term under house arrest. A stunning fall from grace from when he was in the thrall of the real estate mogul, hired as his personal lawyer in 2006.
When I was working for Donald Trump, I have described the organization very much like a cult. From the moment that you step into the building, which is Trump Tower, to the moment you get to the Trump elevators, up to the 26th floor, where you have massive wording on the doors and on the walls, all Trump, followed by photos of Trump everywhere that you go. You do truly believe that Trump is the only name in the entire world.
When I met Donald Trump back in 2002, he was happy to show off Trump Towers and his view of the New York City skyline.
If you had to do a sales pitch for New York, what would you say?
Well, I know so many cities, and I'm in a lot of cities. I'm involved with a lot of cities, but I will say from a sales pitch and from honesty, there is no city in the world like New York, and I know them all.
In an audience with the king of deal-making, over-the-top flattery is his opening.
She like the Queen of Australia? She's beautiful.
Albeit fleeting.
So what's your first name, Tara?
Tara.
Do I need makeup for this?
Nearly 20 years ago, it was property, not the presidency, that was on his mind.
You're not getting out of property.
No, I like it. I mean, I'm stuck. I like it.
Michael Cohen has been with Trump all the way. From big business to star of the small screen. Now he could play a critical role as prosecutors launch criminal investigations into this one-term president, who to this day believes he's been robbed.
You have to remember, Donald Trump is a narcissistic sociopath. So he doesn't see things clearly the way that you or I would. He sees things in a light that's most favorable to Donald Trump. What's happened here is this has been a very, very significant blow to his fragile ego, where he has to now acknowledge that the world, especially this country, we see him as a loser. And that's very difficult for him.
But sometimes losers win, especially if it's Teflon Don.
Donald Trump, he's a clever son of a gun. And there's no way in the world that he's not going to take advantage of a get-out-of-jail-free card.
In a Park Avenue apartment in Manhattan, New York, Michael Cohen is doing time, under house arrest until November for his part in paying $130,000 in hush money to porn star Stormy Daniels to cover up her alleged fling with Donald Trump.
Mr. Cohen, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Cohen.
But the 3-year jail term has cost Cohen more than he ever imagined.
Are you happy?
Michael, what is it that motivates you to speak out against Donald Trump like this? Is it merely vengeance?
No, I don't have vengeance and so on. What happened
You must have a little bit. A little bit?
No. I really do feel an obligation to make amends. First, again, and foremost, is to my wife. I mean, what I put her through with this ordeal was second to none. My children, as much as to my wife, and then to this country. And I will not be the villain of Donald Trump's story. The things that I did should not put me in the history books as being either the villain or a hero. I am merely telling the truth.
Beyond his impeachment trial this week, Donald Trump now faces multiple criminal investigations into his business dealings prior to and during his time in the White House. No longer a sitting president, he is no longer afforded automatic legal protection. What areas specifically is he vulnerable in, given that he no longer has that presidential protection?
As it relates specifically to Donald Trump, it's predominantly his business, his finances, it's his tax evasion, misrepresentations to bank fraud, etc.
So, Michael, will you be testifying in those cases?
What I can tell you is, if called, I would definitely be testifying, and I suspect that the answer to your question, Tara, is yes.
And in regards to the hush money paid to Stormy Daniels, the very crime that you're sitting at home for under house arrest, do you now expect Donald Trump to face prosecution over that, given he no longer has presidential protection?
Oh, yes, it's already part of the overall discussion because of the way that they handled and they treated the payment.
Allegations against Trump of obstruction of justice, witness tampering and perjury have all been made before. This time around, they come with legal clout because with no immunity, prosecution is now possible. Except Michael believes the former president could well be holding one last secret trump card.
Donald Trump, as you stated, he's a clever son of a gun. And there's no way in the world that he's not going to take advantage of a get-out-of-jail-free card. I wouldn't be shocked if he has pocket pardons signed, sealed, delivered, time-stamped, and in the event that they turn around and they come to take him, he'll be like, you cannot arrest me, you cannot incarcerate me, I have a pardon. Here's the letter, you could open it, here's a copy, the originals are sitting with a lawyer or somebody else.
And you're saying that because you know the man, not because you have any evidence of that?
Correct. There is no way that Donald Trump will pass over an opportunity, right, to stay out of jail free card when he knows that the second he walked out of the front doors to the White House, that opportunity would be gone.
Harder to avoid may be the financial dire straits Cohen predicts Trump will find himself in fines for alleged tax evasion and mammoth loans that are due to be paid back soon. What is the financial future for Donald Trump?
I see it being very bleak. I believe that Donald Trump will be held guilty of tax evasion, and I believe that he will be required to pay back a very substantial amount of money in terms of taxes that have not been paid over the course of the last 7 years. So not only will he have this taxable consequence, but he also has over $340 million worth of debt and obligation coming due in the next 2-3 years to Deutsche Bank. So somewhere along the line, he's going to need to come up with a substantial amount of cash in order to pay off the debt that is currently owed and coming due.
How does he do that? Has he got a plan?
No, I think one of two ways. He will continue to grift off of his supporters, where he's raised over $200 million. It's pretty substantial. But I also believe that something that Donald Trump has intended to do, going back to some early conversations between myself, Jared Kushner, and Mr. Trump, and that would be to create a Trump News network. Start, rolling out a competitor, so to speak, to Fox News, which is why he has specifically gone after Fox very recently and very, very strongly, as he likes to say.
Donald Trump's support base is still so strong, he's likely to make billions off a pay TV news network. A compelling enough reason, according to Michael, for Trump to lose interest in politics.
We have made America powerful again.
As for the grown-up Trump children, current criminal investigations into the tax affairs of the Trump Organization may well end their political ambitions too.
First of all, there will never be another Trump into the White House. I'm willing to put money on that bet. Who do we have, right, of the 3 children? Don? I mean, that's just not going to happen. Ivanka, everybody thinks is the superstar. It's just not true. And I do believe that the litigation that is ensuing, both by the district attorney as well as the attorney general here in New York, will be more than enough to put an end to that idea.
So you expect them to be convicted?
I expect them to be charged for certain. Based upon the information that I see, I do see some significant issues coming down the road.
Donald Trump has long declared he's the target of a political witch hunt. Others, like Michael Cohen, want the allegations against him tested in court. And according to Michael, the Senate trial to convict or acquit the former president of inciting insurrection, resuming on Tuesday, is not the end, but just the start of the journey to justice. Do you expect to one day see Donald Trump in jail?
That's a question I often get a lot. I do believe that he will ultimately be responsible for his behavior and his actions. I wouldn't mind seeing it. I would like him to understand what he did to me, and to feel the same pain that I felt being, removed from my family, away from my wife and my 2 children, from my friends, the loss of my business, the loss of my law license, my happiness. And, again, for what, right? Because Donald Trump had an affair with a porn star, and, we didn't want that information to come out. It just, for me, Yes, I would like for him to experience a percentage of the pain that I ended up going through, and that would certainly be karma boomerang.
Despite enduring the COVID pandemic for a year, there are still multi-trillion-dollar questions the world needs answered. Most importantly, how and why it began. Up until now, China has been reluctant to help, hindering efforts to find out the truth about this disease. But finally, a few weeks ago, the World Health Organization was allowed to send experts to Wuhan to investigate. And there was almost instant and significant progress, including from an Aussie doctor on the team who was able to contact and interview the first known case of COVID-19. The central Chinese city of Wuhan, COVID-19's ground zero. And it's now the focus of the highest level investigation into the origins of the virus.
How's the trip going?
Precisely where and when did it make the jump from animals to humans? Some people have compared your investigation to a homicide detective turning up to a murder scene a year later. Does it feel a bit like that?
Well, look, in the ideal world, you would do the investigation as the cases were appearing, but nobody can do that. So, look, it is difficult to go back and do things in a retrospective manner, but that's all you can do.
Professor Dominic Dwyer is a microbiologist and infectious diseases expert. The only Australian among a 15-strong team of scientific sleuths from the World Health Organization. For more than a week now, they've been piecing together an enormous pandemic puzzle, visiting key locations including Wuhan Hospital, the Bat Lab at the centre of COVID conspiracies, and combing through the city's infamous wet market.
Everybody knows that the market allowed things to spread. And we visited the market, and it was very easy to see how things could have spread in that environment, no doubt about it. But whether the first patient was there or whether someone had been infected beforehand and come to the market is actually the key issue here, and that's what we're trying to sort out.
In a bid to answer that question, the team has traced the earliest cases going back as far as the beginning of December 2019, leading to a remarkable face-to-face meeting between Professor Dwyer and the very first reported victim of COVID-19. It sounds like that is, for now, the patient zero.
Yeah, I think the Chinese authorities believe he's probably the first patient, so patient zero. But I think one has got to do a little bit more detective work to be happy that that's truly the case.
It's pretty extraordinary that we've got a disease that's infected 100 million people worldwide, and you've sat down with what could be the very first case.
Oh, well, that certainly crossed my mind on speaking to him and asking him questions. So it was really quite a moment to have that discussion, thinking this person may well be number one.
What the meeting also raised was a bombshell, one that challenges a key assumption about the virus. In terms of age, sex, or level of illness suffered, what can you tell us about this patient zero?
Look, I don't know that it's fair to discuss his details because he can be, I guess, identified. And to be fair, from the privacy point of view, I wouldn't do that. But to be honest, just an ordinary person. There was nothing dramatic in his background or history or activities that gave any clue as to where this might have come from.
Did he work at the Wuhan wet market? Did he visit the market?
Well, this is the interesting thing. He actually didn't visit the market. So whether he got it somewhere else from somebody who didn't know they had it, who themselves might have been at the market, we don't actually know that yet. And so that is perhaps one of the really key points of the whole mission.
ICU medics
It's hard to imagine a more politically sensitive or challenging mission, coming as China continues to reject accusations and downplay the severity of the outbreak in those critical early days.
All along, we have acted with openness, transparency and responsibility. We have provided information to WHO and relevant countries in a most timely fashion.
But there is now mounting evidence of a cover-up. Do you think China's been honest and upfront since the beginning of this outbreak?
It's obvious that we look back to the beginning of the outbreak, that Wuhan health authorities were trying to downplay the significance of this outbreak. They emphasized that there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. But later on, when we go back to the data, it's very obvious that since the beginning of December, there has been human-to-human transmission in the city. And there were also hospital outbreaks in several major hospitals in Wuhan.
Dr. w.h.o is an expert in controlling infectious outbreaks, based at Taiwan's Centers for Disease Control. Given its proximity to mainland China, Taiwan has remained hyper-vigilant since being caught off guard by the SARS outbreak in 2002.
We have been preparing for such outbreaks like SARS for almost 18 years. So we kept alert, high-level alert about any official or unofficial information about disease spread in China.
It was early on the morning of December the 31st, 2019, when Taiwan became one of the first countries to pick up reports of a new SARS-like illness posted on social media by doctors in Wuhan. For weeks, there had been a growing number of patients presenting with severe pneumonia. The doctors were deeply concerned, but immediately shut down by Chinese authorities.
Later on in the afternoon, about 1:30, Wuhan health authorities released that first press release saying that there is an outbreak, but there was no human-to-human transmission, and it's not SARS or it's not coronavirus. So I think that from day one, Wuhan health authority was not honest and was trying to hide important information.
By early January, Wuhan hospitals were rapidly filling up with COVID patients. Critically, health workers themselves were contracting the virus, a clear sign of human-to-human transmission. But China was still giving nothing away.
And later on, even during the second week of January, between January 12th to January 15th, when we sent 2 experts from Taiwan to visit Wuhan, still those information were not provided.
Doctors from Wuhan, their identities carefully hidden, have now confirmed they were ordered to keep quiet.
We knew the virus transmitted from human to human, but when we attended a hospital meeting, we were told not to speak out. Provincial government leaders told the hospitals not to tell the truth.
Gagging health workers was just one of the ways China masked the scale of the unfolding pandemic.
The police will deal with the illegal spreading of rumours. Disruption to social order won't be tolerated.
Even after the outbreak was occurring in Wuhan, they were reporting to WHO and to the world that there was limited or no person-to-person transmission, what we call community spread. That was patently untrue.
It's very sad.
Professor of Global Health Law Lawrence Gostin has been a senior advisor to the WHO for 3 decades.
Not only did China not transparently report that to WHO, but it actually withheld it and gave it wrong information. As a result, people like me were reassuring the world that we're okay. And that turned out to be completely false, and I think verifiably false.
It does now seem scandalous that nearly 6 weeks after the first cases, and with clear evidence of human-to-human transmission, that state-run media in China was still reassuring people
it was safe.
Half a month after the official notification and release of information, we can begin to relax. No clear human-to-human transmission has been found.
And so millions of Chinese headed into the Lunar New Year celebrations oblivious to the unfolding disaster, spreading the virus throughout China and further afield. To call it negligence on China's behalf seems almost kind. This was something much more sinister.
Yeah, I mean, China had a political purpose behind it. And so I think they didn't cooperate just as a matter of national prestige, both to get their own inhabitants to buy into the government's popularity, but also internationally.
So put simply for China, though, this was a matter of pride and saving face.
Yes, it was a matter of pride and saving face and projecting prowess and competence in the world.
The rest, of course, is history. Now, the World Health Organization is trying to make sure this never happens again. Seeking answers to the most important questions, it's forced to rely on cooperation from the very officials who deliberately kept them in the dark. Do you feel diplomatic pressure, political pressure in what you're doing?
Look, to be honest, we try to put that aside. I mean, we're all obviously aware that there's a lot of pressure on the results and so on. But I think the scientific aspect is really the key to focus on and leave the politics, to be honest, to other people.
Do you think if China had been honest, open and proactive from the outset, that this whole global pandemic could have been avoided?
Yeah, I think the pandemic could have been avoided if China was honest and transparent about what's going on in Wuhan in December and early January. Yeah, that's my belief. If the politics in China doesn't change, public health officials are not empowered to tell the truth without political interference, then this kind of tragedy will happen again.
Now to the latest on the curious case of Melissa Caddick, the high-flying Sydney investor who's disappeared without a trace, along with more than $20 million of her family and friends' money. Following on from our story last week, investigators have been inundated with fresh leads, as have we, including new leaked documents that show the extent of the 49-year-old's deception. Melissa Caddick loved the high life, an opulent mansion overlooking Sydney Harbour, luxury sports cars, and an obsession with designer clothing. She managed to drop $230,000 at Christian Dior alone.
Rockstar lifestyle, it was the best of everything.
It was obvious she was living that lavish life.
The high life.
Last week, we detailed the story of this supposedly high-flying businesswoman who's now accused of running an elaborate Ponzi scheme. In the hours after her home was raided by investigators from the corporate watchdog ASIC, Melissa Caddick disappeared without a trace, along with $20 million of money belonging to her investors, a close circle of family and friends.
Evil woman. I hope you're watching, Melissa.
Do you think she is?
Yeah, for sure. She'll be watching.
What do you say to her?
Oh, Melissa. Can't wait to see you in a jail cell.
The story sparked plenty of interest, with Crime Stoppers receiving a fresh wave of tip-offs this week. And there's much more. We've now obtained leaked legal documents that were prepared on behalf of Melissa Caddick's clients. Their calculations show that Melissa and her husband, Anthony Coletti, were splashing on average more than $600,000 a year on their high roller lifestyle. And it's now alleged that came entirely at the expense of her family and friends. The documents stating that there's simply no evidence that the couple's assets came from anything other than investors' funds. Anthony, Tom Steinfort from 60 Minutes. Do you have any idea where Melissa might be? The group of investors is also furious that its funds are still being used to pay the legal bills of Anthony Coletti, despite his claims he knows nothing about the business. The hairdresser turned DJ turned prawn farmer is still living in the couple's $7 million Dover Heights compound, which investors want sold so they can recoup some of their money. But they estimate even with all assets sold, they'll still only ever get back 13.1% of their invested funds. Since our story, there's also been some confusion stemming from the revelation police wouldn't arrest Melissa Caddick, even if they did manage to track her down. The simple explanation for that is at the moment there's no warrant out for her arrest because no charges have been laid yet. But all of that could be about to change. The corporate watchdog ASIC is expected to hand a brief of evidence to prosecutors imminently, readying them to finally lay charges. In the meantime, the hunt for Melissa Caddick continues.
Hello, I'm Tara Brown. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our extra minutes, segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au and the 9Now app.